Lo lefached klal. The tethered rope runs along each side. Uneven and broken boards tied together one by one, maybe 2 feet wide at best. The bridge hovers 100 feet or more over the rushing waters below. And of course, it is moving with the wind. I take one step onto the first shaking board, creaking and swaying, heart pounding, breath caught in my chest. I pause, close my eyes, inhaling and exhaling the clear, cool air. Then I find my balance, stability, and witness the bridge's great strength. And I take small steps, one by one, until I finally reach the other side. In the 19th century, Ukrainian rabbi Nachman of Bratslav once taught, Kol ha'ulam kulo gesher tsar ma'od, v'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. The whole world is a very narrow bridge. The essence is that we need not be afraid. These words adapted from Rabbi Nachman's teaching are puzzling. If the whole world is a very narrow bridge, might that feel limiting, constricting, or lacking in expansiveness? Indeed, might some people use these very words to describe the feeling of fear or panic? So if the whole world is a very narrow bridge, why shouldn't we be afraid? These haunting and beautiful words were written in 1808. Another time, another world. But even today, they continue to provide a framework for how we might journey through uncertain times, the times in which we live. Rabbi Nachman famously struggled with depression and anxiety. We know this much through his teachings and the teachings of his students, for he once also taught, "Today you feel uplifted. Do not let yesterday or tomorrow bring you down." Perhaps knowing this, we might understand the origin of his teaching, likening a narrow bridge to the powerful and universal feeling of anxiety. Anxiety is a unique experience with an evolutionary role. It guards us, it motivates us, it encourages us to make changes, both large and small. It triggers our fight or flight response with the goal of keeping us alert and safe. At times, though, and mainly in hindsight, anxiety may feel unfounded or even like an overreaction. And sometimes when anxiety is most heightened, it can cause us to turn inward, to isolate ourselves as a form of protection and disengage from the outside world. Anxiety and its narrowness is one of those feelings that each of us experiences at different points in our lives, and for some of us at all points in our lives. Anxiety and fear are as commonly felt as any other emotion, but unlike love or joy or sorrow, it is not frequently discussed publicly. Anxiety manifests in so many different ways for so many different people, for there are simply so many things to be afraid of. From a fear of flying, driving on highways, falling down, to where the next paycheck will come from or whether there'll be enough food on the table tomorrow. We may harbor fears about the way we look, the way others perceive us, or of being lonely or alone. We may fear for the health and well-being of our children, of contracting a life-threatening illness, or of becoming a victim of gun violence. Many of us are fearful about the rising number of anti-Semitic acts, or the potential for one in our own neighborhood, of our political climate, of climate change, or the pervasive hate and distrust all across our country. And for some of us, the feeling of anxiety presents itself in every moment throughout the day. It's the experience of worry as an all-day baseline, sometimes to a debilitating degree. Now, anxiety is not new to the Jewish people. In our modern cultural experience, for better or for worse, there seems to be a strong link, perhaps a stereotype, between Jews and worry. It started with Moses and the Israelites, always nervous and complaining, anxious about leaving Egypt or wanting to go back there, worried about entering the promised land or being concerned about wandering forever in the wilderness, preoccupied with not having enough food or having way too much food. These biblical moments go on and on through time, and we see them reflected in the experiences of famous Jews in our own time, including Kafka, Woody Allen, Mrs. Maisel, Larry David, my bubby. May she rest in peace. Maybe it's an Ashkenazic Sephardic thing. For Sephardim, they look to Rosh Hashanah and they say, "Thank you, oh my God. I have made it to another year. I am so full of gratitude for this moment." While the Ashkenazim in the room might say quite literally, "Oh my God, will I make it to the next one?" Like many in this room, anxiety is something I have experienced at different points in my own life. From starting at a new school to traveling internationally by myself for the first time, or more recently becoming a parent and watching as my kids do more things on their own. And over time and with a lot of practice, I've learned effective ways to manage my own anxiety. But with so many recent world events that are anxiety-provoking for all of us, this becomes more and more challenging. Much like Rabbi Nachman, who may have said these words, Kol ha'ulam kulo, fearful of modernity, we may look out at the world fearful of this modern existence. The impact of our anxiety and fear is that we avoid what's scary. We do whatever it takes to feel safe. So what do we do when we feel anxious? We worry, because it often feels like that is the only thing to do. We avoid the things that scare us. We use our phones and social media to connect instead of face-to-face. We make excuses and put off doing things that are overwhelming or create that fear. But where does that leave us? Lonely sometimes, disappointed we missed out, not engaged in our community, not fully living our lives. And the worst part of all that, of that worry, we're still afraid. The challenge with this response to anxiety is that when we use avoidance and worry as a way to feel safe, we stop being our most authentic selves, for we turn away from others and from our communities. When fear becomes so powerful that we retreat inwards rather than step on Rabbi Nachman's metaphorical bridge, there are pitfalls, one being a lack of connection. And when we do approach that bridge, we do so covered in armor. We shield ourselves from the things that scare us, for we simply don't know if we can change what's happening all around us. So in a time of uncertainty, and with so many things to be worried about, how does our tradition help us to move ahead, to step forward onto the bridge? In this new year of 5780, how do we live fully in an anxious world? In Hebrew, there are two words for fear, pachad and yirah. Pachad is associated with our ancestor Isaac. For Isaac was full of fear before the Akedah, when he would have been offered as a sacrifice, which we will read tomorrow morning. This is the kind of fear that occurs when we feel afraid for ourselves, our bodies, our emotional well-being, when we imagine worst-case scenarios. This fear separates us from others and creates a generally fearful view of the world. The second type of fear is yirah, which can easily be translated as fear or awe or reverence, as in yirat Hashem, the fear or awe of God, or Yamim Noraim, these days of awe. Perhaps this type of fear is best described through the book of Jonah. When Jonah is sleeping and a great storm emerges, the verses teach us that the sailors had yirah for the Lord exceedingly. Yirah is the combination of fear and awe. Instead of leading us to retreat, it makes us acutely aware of the profound majesty of life. Pachad keeps us in a place of fear that doesn't allow us to step on the bridge, while yirah allows us to transform the fear and move forward. In the language of psychotherapy, yirah could be understood as embracing fear or anxiety and learning to manage your response to it, rather than letting these powerful emotions take control over you. It's radical acceptance. The idea of accepting anxiety as part of your life and integrating it into the daily experience of living. The biblical King David was full of fear before his battle with Goliath. The book of Samuel describes Goliath as a giant who is physically much stronger than David, so his fear, of course, is understandable. Elie Wiesel of blessed memory teaches about King David and this remarkable battle. When he says, David on his way to fight Goliath was given the king's armor. For a battle this unequal with life and death stakes, armor made sense. But our sages teach that David removed the armor, for it didn't fit him. He took it off and transformed his fear into strength and won the battle. Wiesel teaches that vulnerability can be our greatest tool if we are brave enough to use it. Using a medieval reference, a full suit of armor weighed over 100 pounds, offering coverage from head to toe and yet surely consuming the physical and emotional experience of the person wearing it. When we put on armor, we put a barrier between ourselves and the world. And as that barrier becomes stronger, bigger, heavier, our anxiety about what's on the other side continues to grow, and it becomes easier to retreat. We have much to learn from King David, who realized that the only way he could confront his greatest fear was to confront it without the armor. He was only able to defeat Goliath when he was true to himself, only himself, with a little bit of courage. He drew from connection, vulnerability, faith, and hope. When he removed the armor, his pachad became yirah. His vulnerability was his strength. The example of King David is ever living as a model of how we can embrace and respond to the fear in our lives today. For yirah is not the reduction or elimination of fear, rather it is transforming scary and debilitating fear into awe of God and connection with others. When we remove the armor and step onto the bridge, when we share our vulnerabilities, we connect with our innermost and most authentic selves, and that is when the possibility for deep connection happens, which may allow us to move beyond fear and learn lo lefached klal, to not be afraid. Yet we need help. We cannot walk across that shaky, narrow bridge alone. We need the support of others, the comfort of knowing there are people in this world, in our community, who share the same worries. By being vulnerable together, we can help each other experience yirah. Researcher and author Brené Brown teaches, to fully engage in a life that doesn't come with guarantees, these are risks that involve vulnerability and often pain. But recognizing and leaning into the discomfort of vulnerability teaches us how to live with joy, gratitude, and grace. So how do we live with all the fear, anxiety, and worry in this world? What do we have to do to live more fully, experiencing joy, gratitude, and grace? How do we literally remove the armor? When the idea of anti-Semitism and gun violence keeps us closed off, hidden, and inward, when the noise causing anxiety in our world seems to erode so many things, what do? We move from pachad to yirah. First, we acknowledge fears. We can't do anything about the problem without acknowledging it's there. We take one step at a time. Sometimes what stops us from crossing the bridge is looking all the way to the other side and realizing how far it is, bringing on more anxiety. But what if we break it down to just one step each day? Be mindful and present with the things that are meaningful in our lives. Make space to notice what's already there, since anxiety has a way of stealing the focus so that we miss what we already have. We can ask ourselves, what would we have more of if we had less anxiety? Or how would we spend the time we usually spend worrying? We are all in this process together, and our community is blessed with many forms of support, from our clergy to mental health professionals in our area, to support groups, our own caring community, or programming facilitated by the wonderful Mental Health Initiative here at TBE. There are many other helpful tools for managing anxiety, from prayer and regular spiritual practice, from joining us at Shabbat services, baking challah, yoga, mindful walking, or other exercise, knitting, dancing, surrounding yourself with caring people. The list can go on and on. There are simply so many ways to help us move from pachad to yirah, for that journey is the journey on Rabbi Nachman's bridge. Kol ha'ulam kulo is the whole world, for we are not alone, but rather surrounded by community. This bridge brings us together and is strong enough to hold us all. There's a midrashic story about a son of a king that is 100 days' distance away from his father. His friends said to him, "Return to your father." And he said to them, "I can't. I'm unable." His father sent him a message and said, "Walk as far as you can, and I will come for you the rest of the way." This is what God said to them. We are not alone on this journey of life. And we are not alone on that bridge. When we fear, there are those who can help us emerge from the narrowness of that place. We have to learn to step outside, to remove the armor, to use yirah to encounter our fear. Perhaps that is the moment when we no longer feel afraid. Kol ha'ulam kulo gesher tsar me'od v'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. May we have the courage to walk across the bridge, or simply begin the journey with a single step and not be afraid. And may our journey guide us always on a path of shalom. Shana tova, Mvorach.